Originally, I wanted to come out here and make a bunch of jokes about how we got some news and we didn't really learn much. But then we got some updates on Twitter, we got some updates on Reddit, and even the official League of Legends Twitter account gave us some more news. And suddenly, there is a lot of good news out there. So what else should we do than dive into all of that? So, it is about that time when we normally expect a big League update. The thing is, when the dev update finally dropped this month, it wasn't really that big. As they mentioned, they felt like they didn't really have any massive news to drop, and so they approached the new devlog as if it was a Q&A. With that said, luckily enough, even though it was a Q&A, they also dropped some news there, which go way deeper than people think. So, as always, Meddler is back. But this time, for the first time, Pabro is here with him, who is the new executive producer on League of Legends. Right at the beginning, they mentioned that they recorded this on the 8th of August, so everything that happens after that would not be covered. And if we look at everything that happened since then, Arcane leaked. I'm not sure if they want to talk about that one. But then they dive right into the questions. With the first question being, will Swarm or Arena be permanent? That's right, we are starting with a massive question, and as they said, as of the recording of that video, which was 2 weeks ago, the players have played Swarm for 49 million hours. Now the thing is, we don't really have the context for these numbers, so we don't really know what that means. However, they also confirmed that they got a lot of positive feedback from Swarm, and here's the important part, they are taking notes for future game modes. Especially for all the people who want to play League of Legends outside of Summoner's Rift. To quote them, they want to replicate the fun of Swarm for future game modes. Which basically means one massive W from Riot. There is no doubt that we are getting more game modes. And if they get anywhere close to where Swarm is right now, I think the casual player base is gonna be very happy. And what's also cool is that Pabro, who was previously on Wild Rift for a while, before roaming all around Riot, well, he's responsible for directing all the amazing game modes there. So even if we bring a smidget of that into League PC, that's also a big W. Now, another interesting thing that is connected to this is that League is currently looking for a new environmental artist. This would be kinda unheard of for League because Summoner's Rift doesn't really change. There is not much environment you have to make. Previously, the reason why the team needed this would be for TFT. And now, maybe they could be making more things for Arena. But outside of that, whatever is coming in the future, this should mean that it's not gonna be happening anywhere close Summoner's Rift. And we should be exploring a whole new place. Now, when it comes to Arena, from this video, we didn't really learn much. We don't really have any details, but it was mentioned that there will be a post on game modes soon. And there we should learn just how well did Swarm do. And believe me, I am really interested to hear about that. But then the video moves on to the next question, with that one being all about stream sniping. Now here's the thing, I'm a content creator, I am technically a streamer, I don't really stream League. But anyway, Meddler mentioned that in the patch 14.15 they've already changed a few things to handle this. Essentially, after 2 Q declines, you should get a 30-minute suspension, which should be followed by a 12-hour suspension. Now, how does this help with stream sniping? Well, in order for people to snipe the streamer, they have to get into the queue at the same time. And if the queue doesn't pop at the same time as it does for the streamer whom they are watching, well, they would just decline and queue up again. In theory, this helps, because you can't just keep declining the queues. But in practice, it doesn't stop you from queuing at the same time, and if it doesn't work, well, you just play through the game. So it's not the biggest of possible changes, but it is something that should help a little bit. With that said, they also mentioned that they are open to future changes if they get some good ideas. And I would just like to say, good luck with that. Now next there is a question about AD carries just overtaking League of Legends. If you haven't played the last few patches, well, AD carries are just everywhere. And it all happened, as Medler mentioned, because they were just happy to give AD carry some quality changes. But those changes were of a bit too good quality, and so AD carries just became good everywhere else. If you're interested in this topic, Dums actually has a really cool video on this. And yes, by the time this vlog came out, there are a few patches that are already trying to address this. So, long story short, Riot is working on it. Next, there is a question about the autofill priority. This is an ancient problem that has been with League since the beginning of time. Basically, if you have ever noticed that one team is more balanced than the other team and that's just objectively looking at the ranks, yup, that's technically part of the system. And funnily enough, in this video, they kinda admit that they know that the two sides are not really that well balanced, and that on one side you might get a lot more autofills than on the other side. And to a certain degree, it makes a bit of sense, because there has to be some trade-offs to get people into the games as soon as possible. So you have to sacrifice a little bit of balance for faster matchmaking. And in this video, they weren't really able to give us any details. What we learned is that they are aware of this, there will be a separate post about this in the future, and that by the end of this month, autofill should be a lot better after some updates. There is a dedicated patch to that coming, so fingers crossed, I guess. Next up, they talk about honor. Specifically, the question was, will we be able to honor our opponents again? And the answer is yes! This ancient feature, which was originally taken down because people were honoring their opponents way more than their teammates, is coming back in November. And together with this, there is also a question on the behavioral system. Well, this is a never-ending battle, and it feels like we are getting an update on this every week. But once again, Riot has an update on their fight with toxicity. And yeah, long story short, people are getting clever with their trolling. And they are always finding new ways to hide their griefing, be it by selling their items or just blowing their summoners cooldowns. But now, Riot should have a system that is able to detect all of that. So, they are trying a new system that should be a lot more successful at getting the griefers, and we got a whole new separate post about that. So here, in the first part, they quickly mentioned the honoring of enemies, and they even showed us a quick work-in-progress UI for that. Funnily enough, here they also mentioned that they know that honors usually don't go to the most honorable people, they always go to the people who just carry the game. So Riot is trying to find out how to handle this. And one thing they will try at the start is simply allowing people to honor more people, as mentioned, including the opponents. So who knows if that's gonna work. But then the second part of the blog actually goes into the behavioral system. This is a very detailed post where they go into what is and isn't considered griefing. For example, if you play off-meta picks such as Bard mid, it is not considered griefing. This is simply a valid strategy. But if you play Yuumi mid because you don't care, that is considered griefing. As mentioned before, Riot is trying to come up with systems that can separate these two cases. One thing they will try is a more straightforward detection. For example, if the game sees that at 20 minutes you sell all your items and buy fairy charms, that is a red flag that should be easy to detect. As well as just randomly casting your ultimate without a reason. Remember, Riot now has a system in works that can detect your intention with abilities. After all, that is how Eternals and challenges work. It can give you points for dodging abilities because the system knows where that ability was cast. So all the ability usage is archived in the system. But the other big thing Riot will be trying is a more long-term detection. What that means is that besides just looking at your questionable use of ultimates, the system will also look at what else you are doing. So if you get a lot of reports and you are using questionable language and you are making questionable decisions such as griefing your own jungler, the system will assume that yes, you are a griefer. Now apparently, the current system for detecting griefers has a 70% accuracy, which sounds great, but it's not that great. because that still allows the occasional Disco Nunu to go through a lot of different games. But with these new changes, the chances of detecting a griefer should go up to 95%. It would still not be perfect, but griefing in games should go down dramatically. Now lastly, they also give us a fun statistic here. See, after deploying their repair system earlier this year, which basically refunds players' points after getting griefed, we got some fun numbers as to how many points were given back. With that said, we don't really know across how many games this is, so we are missing context and these numbers are kinda pointless to us. Anyway, that's it for Honor and the behavioral system, so now back to the main video. With the next question being about new player matchmaking. Apparently, new players are getting matched with players with a lot better skill, meaning that the new players often get stomped. So what is Riot doing against this? Well, not that much. First of all, there will be a requirement for playing 10 Summoner's Rift games before getting into Ranked. If you're asking how is it possible that someone gets into a Ranked game without playing 10 Summoner's Rift, that's because that's not counting co-op versus AI. So it's possible that some people just play co-op and then go into Ranked. I'm pretty sure that would break the mind of any mortal being. But besides that, they also made improvements to detecting smurfs, which means that the overall ceiling for skill at the lower end should be lower. But also, things should get better and better after deploying Vanguard, because low-skilled bots are getting removed. And so, new players are no longer getting compared to bots. In other words, without the bots being the bottom floor and the players being above them, the new players will be the new bottom floor. And speaking of Vanguard, there is also one question about that. The question is Vanguard working? Now here they actually have another massive post all about that. And I kinda wanna dive into that in a separate video because there are some crazy stats. And thankfully, Pabro gave us a TLDR of that. So, scripting fell below 1% for the first time in 4 years. Only 1 in 200 ranked games has a scripter in them. There are only very few false positives. And there are a few cases of cheaters stealing other people's accounts. And this is because cheaters are simply running out of accounts to use. And so they are desperately trying to steal other people's accounts. So Medler also adds that it would be a good idea to add your email two-factor authentication. Right now, that might be the only vulnerability that keeps cheaters in with new accounts. Now, Pabro then continues that there were some bugs with older hardware and drivers. There were some issues when you kept League open for a very long time, which essentially means there was likely a memory leak, or there was an issue if you launched League on 2 separate machines. And apparently, contrary to what people may or may not have made up, there were never any cases of Vanguard actually bricking systems. And if that ever happens, the team is asking you to report it as soon as possible. Also, they answer why Vanguard has to launch on PC boot up. Well, it seems like it is more of a problem with Windows. Now, thankfully, Windows is coming up with a new update that might help with this, which means right now it is in the hands of Microsoft. And funnily enough, it was confirmed that the cheaters are now moving to Mac, because they simply can't cheat on Windows anymore. So, Mac is getting Vanguard soon too. Now, next, the video moves on to another interesting question. What's happening with the Mastery Crest update? That's right, when this originally came out, it was a wild discussion. People didn't really like the new designs. And so, Riot is back after respecting the original idea of these crests, while also trying to make them look more modern. And I would like to say, this does seem to be the perfect outcome. It is basically the old emotes, except now they look like they are part of the new League of Legends. I would be very surprised if there were still some people who just violently hated these, because somehow that was the case last time. And speaking of topics that always bring up hate for some reason, they also talk about skins. And here we get a lot of new info. The question is, why do you force champions into specific thematics? Now here we learned that obviously the reasons vary. Sometimes it is that people wanna see a specific champion in a specific skin line, and sometimes it is because the personality of the champion simply fits the skin line. But here we got the big news. Going forward, skins are going through a bit of an update. There will be way less of a focus on new skin lines, and there will be more of a focus on what specific champions are missing in their skin rosters. In other words, it's gonna be more about filling the gaps. And this could be both just taking the champions and putting them into scenarios that are close to their original skin, or it could be even them taking the champions, taking their personality, and giving it a spin. And one example we got is Azir as an attorney. This is a skin that fits the original personality, it gives it a spin, but more importantly, it is a comical skin line, which is something that Azir was previously lacking. Now the cool thing here is that we got another massive separate post with a lot more details. And this is where things go kinda crazy. So, when it comes to the new way of approaching skins, Riot kinda gave themselves rules that they would like to follow. With the focus being more on the champions rather than the specific skin lines, they bring up one of their old rules. That being that they don't want to have any champions with over 1000 days of being without a new skin. For the most part, Riot is successful with this. But occasionally, there is an outlier that suffers a lot. And here they actually bring an interesting point. In the past, in a few specific cases, they focused more on the champion rather than the skin, and it actually gave them a really cool skin. Such as the Guardian cosplay Urgot. For that one, they didn't ask what champion would fit the Star Guardian universe. Obviously. But rather, they looked at Urgot, they noticed that he was missing a more lighthearted skin, and so they decided to just shove him in. And as they mentioned, the Bird Attorney Azir is the exact same thing. They looked at what Azir needed rather than what the skin line needed. That is the biggest twist when it comes to the new skins. Later in the post, they also explain what people should expect when it comes to how these skin lines are coming out. For the most part, Riot is making sure that there is variance. And as an example, after, for example, making Anima Squad, we shouldn't expect something like Project because the theme is very close. So it would make more sense to do something lighthearted or maybe themed after fantasy after that. And added onto that, they also have to pay attention to what is popular around the world. For example, Europe and the US have a vastly different taste compared to something like Asia. So they are alternating between these two. Now, when it comes to skin tiers, Riot is trying to make sure that every champion possibly gets a taste of everything eventually, but they also point out that from a business perspective, it is still quite difficult to put expensive skins on not so popular champions. So, they are trying. Now, what is cool is that based on player feedback, Riot also has this internal graph that gives them an idea of what features are actually valuable to players. For example, a death animation won't really make a skin unique, but new ability visual effects and animations are a must-have for everyone. And here I'm kinda surprised to see that recall is so low. I swear to God, I see people complaining about recall animations all the time. And right below that, they tease Battle Princess Annie, who recently dropped onto PvE, and who has the unique feature of pretty much summoning her own Mordekaiser. But now, perhaps the most important information for all the skin hoarders, we got an updated list of all the legendaries this year, which also includes the champions who already got a legendary. So, for the champions who are getting a legendary or got them already this year, we have Aurelion Sol, Vi, Victor, Seraphine, Aatrox, and Sylas. With the upcoming prestige skins being for Zeri, Diana, Swain, and Caitlyn. with Swain being the only one that's gonna be up for Mythic Essence, with the rest of them being all available for the event tokens. And to close off their post, they quickly go back to the cooldown on skins. Believe it or not, yes, that is a thing. So once again, they repeat that for the less popular champions, the maximum cooldown is 1000 days without a skin. It's kind of funny when you realize that it's still 3 years. And so, when the champions get close to this deadline, Riot starts looking for possible opportunities. With that said, they also try not to just shove a champion into a skin line because they need a skin. Apparently they have done this in the past a few times and those skins were not great. So the question now is, which of these skins are the failures? And unfortunately, the post kinda cuts off after that. And we don't learn about what's the minimum cooldown on skins. And that's a shame, because we all know that it's only a few days for Ahri. Anyway, after that we go back to the main video, where we get one last question, where people asked when are they removing Yuumi? Now obviously, this is a joke. But Riot like to tease things and they like to just hide details everywhere. So when Meddler mentions that they are adding Tumi, who is Yuumi's sister and who is also the sister of Yasuo and Yone, yes, it's obviously a joke. But remember this, just in case Riot somehow manages to hide in an Easter egg when Yasuo's missing father eventually comes into League. Anyway, that is kinda it for the news. At the end here, we do get a reminder that in October, League will be celebrating its 15th anniversary. However, on Reddit, it was confirmed that there won't be any big news. They don't really have any big announcements, so it will be more about just some fun missions and maybe some nostalgic pieces to go through. And as they mentioned, they will be back in September with a bigger dev post, which means we waited a month and a half for not really much. However, again, on Reddit, it was mentioned that the next dev update, which again should be in September, will talk about the preseason of 2025. You know, the one that Pew Pew Lasers mentioned is something that will change League forever, but then Meddler came back and said that changing it forever is kinda an oversell. It will be big, but we should keep things realistic. It will not update everything in League all at once or anything like that. League will apparently stay the same. So, nope! We are not getting League of Legends 2.